In December of 1872, a ship was moving through the Atlantic Ocean with no one at the wheel. The sails were damaged, but the ship was still floating. The cargo was still there, food and water were still on board, but the people were gone.
Gone as in the crew had abandoned ship?
That is what it looked like, but the strange part is this: no one knows exactly why.
So this is a mystery about a ship that survived and people who did not.
Exactly. Today, we are opening the case of the Mary Celeste, the ghost ship found empty.
The ghost ship found empty.
Welcome to Mystery English, the show where we learn English by exploring real mysteries.
I am Theo.
And I am Maya.
Each episode, we open a new case file, a strange event, an unsolved question, or story from history that still makes people wonder.
And along the way, we help you build your English with clear conversation, useful vocabulary, idioms, and questions to think about.
Today's case, the ghost ship found empty.
Listen closely. Every mystery has clues.
And every clue is a chance to learn.
Here is the case brief. The Mary Celeste was an American brigantine. A brigantine is a type of sailing ship with two masts.
Though not a modern ship with an engine, this was a sailing vessel.
Correct. In November of 1872, the Mary Celeste left New York City. It was sailing across the Atlantic toward Genoa, Italy.
What was it carrying?
More than 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol.
Alcohol as cargo. That's going to matter later, isn't it?
It might. The captain was Benjamin Briggs. His wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia, were also on board. There were 7 crewmen.
So 10 people in total.
Yes, and I want to slow down for a moment here because that detail matters. This was not just a ship with workers on it. It was also a family journey.
That makes the case feel different. Captain Briggs was not only responsible for cargo, he was responsible for his wife and child.
Exactly. And by most accounts, Briggs was an experienced and careful captain. So when we think about this mystery, we should not imagine a careless person making a wild choice for no reason.
That changes the way we ask the question.
It does. The better question is not, why did a foolish captain leave a good ship? The better question is, what did an experienced captain see, hear, or believe in that moment?
Because if a careful person makes a dangerous decision, there may have been a serious reason, even if we can't see it now.
Exactly. That's one of the skills we practice in English and in mysteries. We separate judgment from evidence. Yes, 10 people sailed on the Mary Celeste. None of them were ever found.
That's already unsettling.
The ship left New York City on November 7, 1872. For about 2 weeks, it faced rough weather. The last entry in the ship's log was made on November 25th near the Azores.
The log is the written record of a ship's journey, right?
Exactly. A ship's log records position, weather, events, and important details during a voyage.
So after November 25th, the written voice of the ship goes quiet.
And in 1872, that silence was much bigger than it would be today.
Because there was no radio call, no GPS signal, no emergency message.
Right. A ship's log was one of the main ways to know what had happened. If the log stops, we lose the captain's record of the journey.
So we have a gap in the story.
Yes, a gap is an empty space in information. In a mystery, a gap is often where theories begin.
And sometimes where bad theories begin.
True. When we don't have enough facts, our imagination tries to fill the space. That can be useful, but it can also be dangerous.
Useful because it helps us ask questions. Dangerous because we may start believing a story before we have evidence.
Exactly. So for this episode, we will keep asking, is this a fact or is this a theory?
Nicely said. 10 days later, another ship saw the Mary Celeste.
That ship was the Dei Gratia.
Yes, the Dei Gratia was sailing in the Atlantic, about 400 miles east of the Azores. Its captain, David Morehouse, noticed a ship moving strangely.
Moving strangely, how?
It seemed to be drifting. Drifting means moving without clear control, pushed by wind or water.
So the ship was not completely destroyed, it was still moving, but nobody seemed to be guiding it.
Exactly. Morehouse knew the Mary Celeste. In fact, the Mary Celeste had left New York before the Dei Gratia, so it should have been farther along its route.
That would be a warning sign. If a ship is in the wrong place, something may have gone wrong.
Morehouse sent a boarding party to investigate.
A boarding party is a small group that goes on to another ship.
Right. When they climbed aboard, they found no captain, no crew, no family, and no clear explanation.
What did they find?
They found a ship that was damaged but still seaworthy. Seaworthy means safe enough to travel on the sea.
So it was not sinking.
No, there was some water in the hold, the lower part of the ship, but not enough to make the ship obviously doomed.
That is important. If the ship were clearly sinking, the mystery would be easier.
Exactly. The cargo was largely intact. The food and water supplies were still there. Personal belongings were still on board.
So this does not look like pirates.
Not strongly. Pirates usually want valuable goods, but the cargo was not taken.
What was missing?
The lifeboat was missing.
Was anything else missing?
Yes, reports say some navigational instruments and ship papers were also gone.
Navigational instruments are tools sailors use to find their position, right?
Exactly. Instruments like a sextant or a chronometer help sailors know where they were at sea. Ship papers could include documents and records.
That sounds important. If the people were forced off the ship suddenly, why take navigation tools?
That is one reason some people think the crew may have left in an organized way, not in total chaos.
So the missing lifeboat tells us they probably left the ship. The missing instruments may tell us they expected to navigate, even for a short time.
Exactly. It doesn't solve the case, but it changes the feeling of the scene. It looks less like everyone disappeared instantly and more like someone made a decision to leave.
A decision that may have made sense for 10 minutes, but not for 10 hours.
That is a very good way to put it.
That changes the picture.
It does. A lifeboat is a small boat used to leave a larger ship in an emergency.
So the people probably left the Mary Celeste in the lifeboat.
That is one of the strongest clues, but we still don't know why they left.
If the ship was still seaworthy, why abandon it?
That is the central question.
I want to pause on one word, abandon.
Good idea. To abandon something means to leave it behind, often because of danger or because you believe you cannot stay.
So the Mary Celeste was abandoned, but the reason for the abandonment is the mystery.
Exactly. And there's another useful word, adrift.
Adrift means floating without control.
Yes, the ship was found adrift with no one steering it.
A ship adrift is already scary. A ship adrift with food, cargo, and no people is a mystery.
After the boarding party found the Mary Celeste empty, members of the Dei Gratia cruise sailed it to Gibraltar.
So they didn't leave it floating in the ocean.
No, they brought it to port. In Gibraltar, British authorities held a salvage hearing. Salvage, that is another useful word.
Salvage means saving a ship, cargo, or property from danger or loss at sea. If you rescue an abandoned ship, you may receive payment.
So the Dei Gratia crew could be paid for bringing the Mary Celeste safely to port.
Yes, but the hearing became suspicious. Authorities wondered if there had been a crime, a trick, or foul play.
Foul play means criminal or dishonest action.
Correct, but after an investigation, there was no strong evidence of foul play.
So no proof of murder, mutiny, or piracy.
And that is important because famous mysteries often collect extra details over time.
Extra details that sound exciting but may not be true.
Exactly. People love a ghost ship story, so later retellings added drama, suspicion, and sometimes pure invention.
That is a useful English word, retelling.
A retelling is a new version of a story. A retelling can be accurate, but it can also change details.
Though with the Mary Celeste, we should be careful with dramatic versions of the story.
Very careful. If a detail is not supported by the investigation, we should treat it as a story, not evidence.
That is a good rule for any mystery. A good story is not always a good explanation.
Exactly, and that is why the mystery survived. The ship was there, the people were gone, but the evidence did not point clearly to one answer.
Let's slow down and do a listening check.
Good idea.
Here is the simple version of the case. The Mary Celeste left New York on November 7th, 1872.
It was sailing to Genoa, Italy with industrial alcohol as cargo.
Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their young daughter Sophia, and 7 crewmen were on board.
The last log entry was made on November 25th near the Azores.
About 10 days later, the Dei Grazia found the Mary Celeste adrift.
The ship was empty, but still seaworthy.
The cargo and supplies were still there,
But the lifeboat was missing.
and the 10 people who had been on board were never found.
Now let's collect our language clues. First word, brigantine.
A brigantine is a 2-masted sailing ship. Example, the Mary Celeste was an American brigantine.
Second word, adrift.
Adrift means floating without control. Example, the Mary Celeste was adrift in the Atlantic.
Third word, abandon.
To abandon means to leave something behind. Example, the crew appears to have abandoned the ship.
Fourth word, seaworthy.
Seaworthy means safe enough to travel on the sea. Example, the Mary Celeste was damaged but still seaworthy.
Fifth word, lifeboat.
A lifeboat is a small boat used to escape from a ship in an emergency. Example, the lifeboat was missing.
And our bonus word is salvage.
Salvage means rescuing a ship or cargo from danger. Example, the Dei Grazia crew brought the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar for salvage.
Now our mystery idiom, jump ship.
Literally, to jump ship means to leave a ship, especially without permission.
But in everyday English, it can mean to suddenly leave a job, plan, or group.
For example, when the project became too risky, 2 investors jumped ship.
In the Mary Celeste case, we should be careful. We do not know that anyone literally jumped from the ship.
Right, they may have left in the lifeboat, but the idiom helps us talk about leaving suddenly.
Now, our grammar in the wild today is must have and might have.
We use must have when we feel something is very likely about the past.
For example, the people must have left the ship somehow because no one was on board.
And we use might have when we are less certain.
For example, they might have believed the ship was sinking.
Or they might have feared an explosion.
Exactly. Must have is stronger. Might have is more careful.
This case needs both. Some things are very likely, other things are only possible.
Now, let's separate evidence from theory.
Here is what we know. The ship left New York with 10 people on board.
It was found empty near the Azores.
The ship was seaworthy. The cargo was mostly intact. Food and water were still on board.
The lifeboat was missing.
There was water in the hold, but not enough to clearly explain panic.
One pump had been taken apart or was not working properly.
And after the investigation in Gibraltar, there was no proof of foul play.
Correct. Now, the theories. Theory 1, pirates.
This is dramatic but weak.
Yes, if pirates attacked, we would expect missing cargo, signs of violence, or stronger evidence of a struggle.
But the cargo and belongings were largely still there.
Exactly. So piracy does not explain the evidence well.
Theory 2, mutiny.
A mutiny is when a crew rebels against the captain.
That is another dramatic theory.
But again, there was no clear evidence. No bodies, no strong signs of violence, no useful proof.
So possible in imagination, but weak in evidence.
Right. Theory 3, alcohol fumes.
Because the ship was carrying industrial alcohol.
Yes, some people have suggested that alcohol vapor built up and made the crew fear an explosion.
So maybe there was a small blast or a loud pressure event, and Briggs ordered everyone into the lifeboat.
Maybe, but the evidence is mixed. Some investigators noted that the cargo was largely intact, and there was not strong proof of a major explosion.
So this theory explains fear, but not everything.
Right. Theory 4, a temporary evacuation.
Temporary means not meant to last forever.
Yes. Some people think Captain Briggs may not have planned to abandon the Mary Celeste permanently. He may have moved everyone into the lifeboat for safety while they watched the ship.
Though they might have stayed close to the Mary Celeste.
That is the idea. The lifeboat may have been connected to the ship with a rope if the crew feared an explosion or if they wanted to wait and see whether the ship was sinking. That might make sense.
But then the rope could have broken.
Exactly. If the rope broke, the Mary Celeste could have drifted away faster than the lifeboat. Then the people would be alone in a small boat in the Atlantic.
That is terrifying because the ship was still there but unreachable.
And it would explain why the ship survived while the people disappeared.
It also explains why they might have taken navigation tools. They did not expect to vanish, they expected to manage an emergency.
Yes, this theory is still only a theory, but it fits several clues.
So the tragedy may have been a small separation that became permanent.
Exactly.
Theory 5. A mistake about the ship taking on water.
This is one of the more reasonable theories. The ship had been through rough weather. There was water in the hold. A pump may have been damaged or blocked.
If Captain Briggs thought the ship was taking on too much water, he might have ordered everyone into the lifeboat.
Exactly. The problem is that the Mary Celeste was not actually sinking when it was found.
But Briggs did not know what we know.
That's the key point. He had to make a decision in the moment with limited information, bad weather, and his family on board.
So the mystery may not be why would anyone leave a safe ship.
It may be, why did they believe the ship was unsafe?
That is a much better question.
And notice the language there. We're using believe, not know.
Why is that important?
Because people act on what they believe at the time. Later, investigators may know more, but the person in danger only has the information in front of them.
Though Captain Briggs may have believed the ship was unsafe, even if the ship later proved seaworthy.
Exactly. That does not make him foolish. It makes the situation complicated.
That is a good phrase for learners too, proved seaworthy.
Yes. If something proves useful or proves dangerous or proves seaworthy, it shows itself to be that way after a test.
The Mary Celeste proved seaworthy because the Dea Gracia crew managed to sail it to Gibraltar.
Correct. But Briggs did not get to see that proof. After leaving the ship, the lifeboat may have been lost in bad weather, separated from the Mary Celeste, or damaged.
And because no one survived, we cannot confirm the final step.
Correct. The strongest theory still has a missing final chapter.
So, Maya, what theory do you find most convincing?
I think the most likely explanation is a mistaken emergency. Captain Briggs may have believed the Mary Celeste was in danger, perhaps because of water in the hold, pump trouble, or fear connected to the cargo.
Though he made a cautious decision that became deadly.
Possibly, leaving the ship may have seemed safer for a short time, but once the lifeboat separated from the Mary Celeste, the situation could have become much worse.
I find that more believable than pirates or sea monsters.
Sea monsters are not evidence.
Fair, they are atmosphere.
Exactly. And this case teaches us something important about mysteries. The most likely answer is not always the most dramatic answer,
Sometimes the answer is a small mistake under pressure.
or a reasonable decision based on incomplete information.
That phrase is useful, incomplete information.
Yes, incomplete information means you don't have all the facts you need.
And people make real decisions with incomplete information all the time.
That is why this mystery still feels human. The ship survived, but the people probably made one decision they could not undo. Exactly. So the case comes back to one question.
Why did they believe they had to leave the ship?
Now it's your turn. What do you think happened to the people on the Mary Celeste?
Try to answer in English using at least 2 pieces of evidence from the episode.
You can begin with one possible explanation is,
Then add, the evidence suggests.
and if you disagree with a theory, try, I am not completely convinced because.
Here's a model answer. One possible explanation is that Captain Briggs believed the ship was taking on too much water.
The evidence suggests this because there was water in the hold, one pump had problems, and the lifeboat was missing.
For a stronger answer, add one limitation. For example, however, this theory does not explain exactly what happened to the lifeboat.
That's a good intermediate answer. It gives an opinion, supports the opinion, and admits what we still don't know.
Good. Now make your own theory. Speak it out loud, write it down, or discuss it with a friend.
If you want to practice the vocabulary, listening questions, and discussion phrases from this episode, Download the free case file worksheet.
And tell us your theory. Did the crew fear sinking, an explosion, a storm, or something else?
Until next time, keep your English clear.
And your curiosity sharper than the clue.
This has been Mystery English.